At last, the game that was announced over a year ago finally released. Spongebob Squarepants Battle for Bikini Bottom Rehydrated has been a great experience to relive. A game that succeeded a rocky start of the 6th generation consoles ended up being a cult classic that spawned the remake 17 years later. The original wasn't a thing I played when I was younger, so no nostalgia goggles for this. Let's take a dive. The game has been universally panned by professionals. I wonder why.
No, 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 no.
But the overall general audience has been overwhelmingly positive. Maybe it didn't have the same love and care as many games do, but it lived up to par for being a modern remake of the original. The game is what many call a one-to-one remake of the original, and I couldn't agree anymore. The biggest and noticeable changes are the graphics. Despite having vibrant colors, the game has been upgraded to run at 16:9 and even to 4K on PC. Although the color palette can be a little too much in certain level stages, it helps out in parts where normally dark, such as Rock Bottom and Kelp Forest. In a time where games are pushing graphical limits and pumping millions of dollars towards making lifelike atmospheres, only to make the game look dark and soulless, Battle for Bikini Bottom Rehydrated deviates from that norm and shows us a colorful, vibrant game with an essential asset that gets overlooked by many dev studios. Fun! The music has been remastered and sounds so much crisper. I'm happy that Steam gave a digital soundtrack of the OST when you pre-order the game. Now, one of the biggest things that got fans upset was the reuse of the original voice lines. Many fans were hoping to hear Clancy Brown lend his voice to Mr. Krabs finally, but that never happened. Why? Well, it's not 100% sure why, but it could be because the actors are in a union contract that keeps them from performing their lines on their own for projects they all work for. What that means is that if one of them gets asked to redo the lines, they all have to redo them together. Besides, since the release of Rehydrated, Tim Conway, the voice of Barnacle Boy, and Ernest Borgnine, the voice of Mermaid Man, both passed away in 2019 and 2012. So that would make things much harder to work with, unfortunately. I have to say, the in-game interaction animations are improved. The original was kinda weird and awkward. It suffered how old games used to be when in-game cutscenes interactions would look like almost emotionless and non-existent facial expressions. You know, kinda like Oblivion's NPCs when they talk to each other.
What is it?
Hi there.
So long.
Ever bought enchanting
You too.
supplies from Calendar? I've shopped there
Good
a
morning.
few times. If
Hi
you're looking
there.
for soul gems, that's the place to go. I've heard others say the same. What's the news from the other parts of Tamriel?
Some expressions were there, but they didn't quite fit well most of the time. In Rehydrated, the animations were fixed and expressions of emotions fit in much better. Take a look at SpongeBob's face in the beginning with Gary.
Yeah, Gary. It sure looks like we're in a doozy of a pickle. I think I'm gonna have to learn a lot in order to fix this mess.
Now take a look at Plankton's expression when SpongeBob steps out of the pineapple.
Go away, SpongeBob. You're polluting my thinking space.
Trying to steal the Krabby Patty formula again, eh, Plankton? Well, you won't get away with it.
I've got bigger fish to fry. I've got to figure out how to regain control of the chum bucket.
So the gameplay is a toss-up. In some parts it feels like they polish it out, but with these new things something else gets broken. It's hard for me to pinpoint where exactly the biggest flaws of the game suffers, but there have been times that made me say, man, I think the original did this just fine, or why didn't they keep this from the original? You can enter some soft locks in the game, but the game was built to avoid that as much as possible by pausing the game and warping out to another spatula. Okay, hear me out on this one, but one of the biggest letdowns in the game is how painfully terrible it is to grind shiny objects to get the rest of the spatulas from Mr. Krabs. Yes, I know this is more of a personal take, so let me show you what I mean. You start off with paying the Crustaceous Cheapskate 3,000 shiny objects and then 6,000 shiny objects, and then keeps going by 3,000 after each spatula you buy until you get to the 8th and final one. You go from 3,000 to 6,000, 9,000, 12,000, 15,000, 18,000, 21,000, 24,000. That's 108,000 shiny objects to obtain. And it's not easy to get this many in a casual playthrough. You can spend hours trying to earn over 108,000 shiny objects to get all 6 spatulas from that dastardly decapod. On top of that, you have to pay shiny objects to access certain parts of the game. in order to get spatulas to progress further in the game. I think in the original, the total was about 45,000 shiny objects to get spatulas from Mr. Krabs. Getting the spatulas from the sweaty shellfish isn't required to beat the game. If you're going for 100%, then be prepared for this. To reiterate, Battle for Bikini Bottom Rehydrated offers a nice throwback to the original game with plenty of improvements and nuances. New fans of SpongeBob would not be disappointed, while many original fans will be split on it. There are plenty of things that the game improved on but fell short on others. Despite it being considered a rushed game, Rehydrated didn't become another Sonic 06, but may have become the Donkey Kong 64 in the Spongebob Squarepants video game franchise. So the final verdict for me is a 7.5 out of 10. Some games benefit from one-to-one remakes, and Battle for Bikini Bottom is definitely a great fit for that. The graphical and animation updates were a couple of key components needed to live up to today's standards. However, some gameplay elements and mechanics don't hold up well. It's still a great game to play, but it can be a little bothersome with the glitches and bugs. Also, it's a better remake than Resident Evil 3 Remake.